Hi, I'm Alan Huot, President of Wildlife Control Supplies and the owner of the Collarum Predator Restraint. The Collarum is a safe, humane, canine-specific device unlike any other on the market today. The Collarum is designed to live capture canines by throwing a cable loop over their head and around their neck. The end of the capture loop is anchored in the ground and the canine is held like a dog on a leash. It is unique in several ways. First, the Collarum was designed to be 100% canine specific. The trigger requires a pull action rather than the push mechanism normally employed by traps. The effectiveness of this action for canines has been proven through the years by the M44 cyanide gun, which uses a similar trigger principle. Other animals sometimes spring the Collarum, but we've never caught anything but coyotes, dogs, and fox. Second, the Collarum is more humane than existing traps. In testing conducted by the Denver National Wildlife Research Center in 1999, 70% of the coyotes caught showed no significant injuries under international standards. The most common injury was to the teeth in approximately 1 of every 5 animals. While the live capture aspect is important, we have also developed a lethal cable for situations where the operator is certain that the captive animal will be destroyed. This cable will rapidly and humanely dispatch the animal. Third, this trap is much safer to utilize in areas where people, pets, and other domestic animals may come in contact with it. An unknowing human springing the Collarum is at little risk. Animals other than canines are very unlikely to be caught by this device, even if they spring it, and captured domestic dogs can be released with no harm done. The Collarum has been used to catch coyotes in the backyards and gardens of urban residents, at a city landfill to catch feral dogs, and among livestock to catch coyotes and fox. Recent field tests show an 80 to 90% capture rate. This is what the Collarum looks like. In a minute, I'll take you to some footage of canines that were caught in the wild and also some sample field sets so you can see what this thing looks like in actual use. First, I'd like to talk about a few features that distinguish the Collarum from any other device. These are the major components of the Collarum. You have the throw mechanism with the cable support arms and the trigger. This is where the animal bites and pulls. And the capture cable, attached with 2 clips to the side of the cable support arms. Next, I'd like to show you the setting of the Collarum as far as location, bedding, and some tips and tactics regarding its usage. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about safety. As you can see, I'm wearing leather gloves. I wear gloves when I'm setting the Collarum as well as bedding it. Also, safety goggles. I happen to wear prescription glasses, but you'll want to wear goggles at a minimum when handling the Collarum. If it fires while you're handling it, throws debris, you want to have some goggles on. Also, long sleeve shirt. As you can see, I've got a long sleeve shirt on. Again, as you're handling it or as you're bedding the Collarum and it fires and throws debris, it's just an added safety precaution. The throw mechanism arrives assembled except for the cable support arms, which are mounted on the throw lever on the inside, as shown here. Because of varying uses and preferences, no pull cap or bite piece is installed when you first receive your Collarum. You'll have to install that yourself, although they are included. Please consult your parts list and assembly instructions for more information or visit the website at www.collarum.com. The next step is to insert the cable cinch spring into the base plate of the Collarum. First, place the end of the spring with the coil spring into the hole on the opposite side of the base plate on the end of the Collarum. A small protrusion comes out on one side of the cinch spring, which is placed through that hole, and by rotating and maneuvering the cinch spring, it's hooked in place on the opposing side of the Collarum. Please note that the cinch spring hook is pointed in the same direction as the trigger. Once it is mounted, the cinch spring sits lightly in place and is held in the base of the Collarum. Before cocking the trap, you should check the trigger tension. This is the trigger of the Collarum right here. By loosening or tightening the trigger bolt, which is on the underside of the base plate, it creates friction with those nylon spacers on the trigger and requires a lighter or heavier pull to activate the trap. The Collarum arrives with very slight or no tension on the trigger. This makes the trap fairly hair-triggered. Adding very light tension will prevent trigger creep and possible misfires. Higher tension produces a trap that excludes smaller canines or smaller animals. Keep in mind that ground conditions could make the trigger harder to pull. You know, wet ground or freezing ground, once the trap is buried, could make it more difficult for the animal to pull. So generally, I'd say little or no tension on the trigger is all that's needed. Before engaging the cinch spring, we need to cock the throw mechanism of the Collarum. I like to use a flat spot. It could be the tailgate of my truck, it could be a flat rock, it could be a cutting board, or a flat surface like this floor. You begin by placing the Collarum such that the trigger is pointed away from you and the throw arms are pointed towards you. I grasp the throw arm, lifting the throw arm up. These are the two coil springs that power the throw arm. And using my body weight, I cock the throw arm back. And as I approach the trigger, and the hole in the throw arm wants to go down over the dog in the trigger, the throw arm is now locked in place and is ready to go. The Collarum is powered by two sets of springs. The coil springs, which power the throw arm that I've already shown you, and the cinch spring, which, as the name implies, cinches down on the cable once the canine is captured. The cinch spring is engaged by grasping it and compressing it such that the hook passes underneath the horizontal arm and engages in the slot in the side of the throw arm. The Collarum is now fully set, with the exception of the cable that I'll show you in a moment, and can be placed in the ground. The last thing we need to do before we go out in the field and actually set the Collarum in the ground is to mount the cable to the Collarum, and I wanted to do that in here so that you get a really good view of it. This is a 3/16 galvanized aircraft cable that we're using for this. It does have a swivel on one end for anchoring it, and you'll see that when we get out in the field. It also has a stop affixed to the cable so that the loop doesn't completely close. This is a non-lethal cable for canines. And it also has a lock, obviously, right here. Now you start by, I like to cross my cable and I leave about a 3 or 4 inch tail with the anchor sticking out. And this is the section of the cable that's actually going to go under that hook in the cinch spring and ride in that groove in the throw arm. So let's go ahead and show you how that sits on the collarum. You place it down on the collarum in front of you, and again, that tail that I talked about that's going to be anchored to the ground 3 to 4 inches goes under the hook in the cinch spring and sits in the groove of the throw arm. The next thing to do is to attach the cable to each of the clips on the cable support arms so that it forms a nice circular loop. You want to make sure you have 6 to 8 inches of space in front of the trigger so that when a canine bites on this trigger, the loop makes it past their ears and you get an effective capture. The last thing you want to do is just make sure that the cable that the lock is attached to is underneath the cable that the anchor is attached to the ground with. Makes it a little easier for bedding once we get out to the field. And that's all that there is to mounting the cable to the collarum. Before I take you out to the field to show you how to set this in the ground, what I'd like to do is show you how to deactivate the collarum. If for whatever reason you need to unset it, I'd like to show you how to do that safely. The first thing we do, of course, is to remove the cable from each of the clips and under the cinch spring and remove that. Again, wearing my leather gloves, I'll pick the collarum up and basically do the operations in reverse. Deactivate the cinch spring, which is now sitting in that slot on the throw arm, grasping it firmly and pulling it back so that the hook re-engages the horizontal bar on the cinch spring. Once again, I'll place the collarum down on a flat, solid surface, and using my body weight, I'll rest my hands on each side of the trigger and place my weight on it. And then, just lifting up with my index finger, I'll disengage the trigger of the collarum and let that throw arm ride over safely. The collarum is now deactivated, safe to handle, safe to transport.